Hello and good morning, and you're very welcome to this live stream brought to you by Safefood. I'm your host, Sally Ann Barrett, and over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be telling you all about a really interesting new safety campaign that's being brought to you by Safefood. Now, for the first time, Ireland is going to be involved in this new campaign. It's called EU Choose Safe Food. We'll be telling you all about it. We'll be speaking to one of the experts on this in just a moment's time. Just to let you know, we are streaming live here now on Facebook and YouTube. And if you do have any comments to make, please do so, and we will respond to you after the live broadcast. If you're watching back on the replay, feel free to make some comments too, and we will respond to you there. So we'll be wrapping up at the end, telling you how you can find out even more information. But let's get started about what EU Choose Safe Food is all about. And I'm delighted to be joined here on the live stream this morning by one of the experts in this field here with Safe Food in Ireland, and that's Dr. Linda Gordon, and she's Chief Specialist Food Safety with Safe Food. Good morning to you, Linda.
Good morning, Sally Ann.
I suppose firstly, let's start off a little bit about Safe Food itself, the organisation that you work for here in Ireland. So just to inform people what Safe Food does before we look at the European campaign.
Yes, Safe Food is the North-South agency responsible for promoting food safety and nutrition to the public and to food businesses and generally across the food chain on the island of Ireland. And we do this through awareness and information campaigns, and we also carry out scientific research into food safety and nutrition topics.
So the reason that we're going live here, yourself and myself this morning, is to talk about EU Choose Safe Food, this new campaign that Ireland is going to be involved in for the very first time. Can you tell us a little bit about how important that is and who else is involved in this also?
Well, we're delighted to be involved in this campaign. It's an EFSA campaign, so the European Food Safety Authority, and it's all about increasing awareness of the role of science in food safety across Europe and about encouraging engagement amongst the public around the importance of science and food safety. So in Safe Food, sorry.
No, that's okay. So it's all about, I suppose, helping us as citizens to think a little bit more critically when we're making food choices, and it's linking up the science to what we're doing practically every day.
Yes, absolutely. And, it's really important that the advice and the information that we give people is underpinned by science. And there's a lot of research that goes into, formulating messages that we give to people around food safety and food safety practices in the home. So it really is important to stress that the information and the advice that we give is based on science.
Now, the fact that Ireland is going to be involved in this EU-wide campaign for the first time, I mean, that's quite prestigious for Safe Food to be involved in. And I imagine it'll lead to a lot of link-ups with European partners and shared knowledge on topics.
Absolutely. And it's really important to have those connections. And we're delighted to be part of a campaign. As you say, it's the first time we've been involved in this. So we're delighted to be part of a campaign that's, going on across Europe and that we can link in with colleagues in other countries. So, food safety is the same. Things like bacteria and viruses don't recognize borders. They're the same issues no matter where in Europe you're living. So it's really important that we can kind of share this science and kind of have the common goals of keeping the public safe.
Will there be particular groups, Linda, that you'll be hoping to target under this campaign to get the information across to in particular? I'd imagine, young parents in particular that are starting out with children, there's a lot of new details coming to them about what's safe for children in terms of allergies and everything. Will they be a particular group that you'll be looking to inform?
Yes, I mean, parents of young children, when we're younger and we're single, we don't have any dependents, food safety is probably not top of the agenda. And we're at a stage of lives where we're generally fairly fit and healthy and maybe not as vulnerable as other groups might be. So it's probably not, the most important thing in our minds. But once we have children and then we realize, very young children, particularly under 5s, are one of the groups that are more vulnerable to food poisoning because their immune systems aren't fully developed. And, the changes that come along with having a family and cooking and preparing food, and you want everything to be safe and to be nutritious and healthy for your child. So obviously that is an important life stage, I suppose, where people are kind of engaging with food safety. And as you mentioned, allergens also, obviously, if you have a child that has a food allergy, then that brings a whole other dimension to the area of food safety, really, and the importance of having to make sure that you can control what your child eats, and to make sure that they're not exposed to the allergen that may cause them harm.
Yeah, and that has been a really topical subject as well in the last number of years, I suppose, because we have so much more awareness of it. We might come back to that in a couple of minutes, if that's okay, Linda. There's four main themes that are being dealt with under the EU Choose Safe Food campaign through Safe Food Ireland, here rolling it out here across the country. Let's focus on one, foodborne diseases. I mean, some of us would know the names of some of them. You're talking about listeria, salmonella, and others. What are you hoping to get across when it comes to foodborne diseases that people really need to be aware of and, again, reminded of?
Well, I suppose that people need to realize, and one of the questions that people often ask me is, what causes food poisoning, or, how long does it take to become ill, from food poisoning? But I suppose the thing to remember is that food poisoning is not one illness. It can be caused by a whole range of bacteria and viruses. So as you mentioned, things like listeria, salmonella, E. coli, a particular form of E. coli called S-tech, which can be very harmful, and Campylobacter are the ones that we see most often. They're the most common ones in terms of bacteria, and also things like norovirus, which we've all heard of, that can be transmitted through food as well. Hepatitis A and hepatitis E are other viruses that you can find in foods. So really, for a healthy adult, your chance of getting sick depends on what kind of bacteria or virus, how many of them are present in the food, and your own kind of susceptibility. And also to be aware that different bacteria, different viruses will have different incubation times. So the time between eating the food and becoming ill or experiencing symptoms will vary hugely. So I think a lot of the time, if we start to feel ill and we think it's maybe related to food, we think about the last meal we ate or what we ate the night before, but it could be what you ate 2 days ago, 3 days ago. In the case of listeria, it could be a couple of weeks ago. So it's really important to be aware that there's a lot of variety around the types of symptoms and the incubation times and the features, depending on what's causing the illness.
Yeah, and I think this is particularly timely at this time of year, when the weather is getting so good and we're all looking to maybe eat outdoors a little bit more, or eating on the go a little bit more. So the question people want to know is, what actions do you take to try and avoid any of those kind of diseases? What should you be doing in terms of keeping yourself free from the likes of food poisoning?
As you say, this time of year, the weather's getting better and we want to eat outdoors and have barbecues and things like that. And there is a seasonality to a lot of foodborne diseases and foodborne infections, and they often do peak over the summer months. And now, not all of that is down to our handling practices, but some of it at least is down to the fact that the weather is warmer. We may be going on picnics, we may be having barbecues, and we're away from the kitchen and maybe away from our normal routines around food safety. So it's really important to remember, the main things that bacteria will need to grow in a food. They will need warm temperatures, they need moisture, and then time. So any food that is left out in warm temperatures for long periods of time, for a few hours, an afternoon, bacteria can grow easily and multiply very quickly in that food. So that's why it's really important, especially in summer, to get your food storage right.
And then in terms of the cooking as well, Linda, I suppose it's barbecue season. When the sun comes out at all here in Ireland, we're very quick to wheel out the barbecue. And I don't know about you, but I am so fearful that I would undercook on a barbecue that I nearly always cook in the oven and then just throw it on the barbecue for the last few minutes. But can you give a little bit of advice maybe for people now that we are in that time of year when we are talking about, the likes of food poisoning? If you're cooking, barbecuing, what should you be looking out for and making sure of?
Absolutely, Sally Ann. I think we've all had the experience of the burger or the sausage that was burnt on the outside and then, raw in the middle. So That's something that everybody wants to avoid. So the top tip for barbecue, to make sure that you're cooking, certain types of meat need to be cooked the whole way through. So anything that it has made from poultry or pork or anything that is minced or skewered or anything like that. So all kind of burgers, kebabs, sausages, all of those things need to be cooked the whole way through. It's different to something like a steak where you can eat it, it can be underdone on the inside. So the best way to make sure that your meat is cooked the whole way through is to use a meat thermometer. So what you do is you take the food off the heat, off the barbecue, pop the thermometer into the thickest part, and then you're looking to see it reading 75 degrees Celsius. And then you know that any harmful bacteria that might have been there have been killed, and it's perfectly safe to eat.
Yeah, and like you kind of mentioned there earlier as well, any of your kind of side dressings, you have to be really careful about the length of time that things have been left out. I'm just thinking, for instance, egg mayonnaise and things like that, people may not be aware of. You have to be really conscious of how you're storing it and how long it's left out of chilled conditions.
Absolutely. So you need to make sure that anything like the salads and coleslaw and anything like that, the side dishes, as you say, leave those in the fridge until the very last minute. Or if you're at a picnic or something, leave them in your cool box or your ice box until you're ready to eat. And then don't leave them sitting around. If they've been sitting around, under the sun for a couple of hours, then I would discard them at that point. So it's really important to make sure that they are kept cold. So if you keep your fridge at 5 degrees or below, if you're, away from home and you're picnicking or barbecuing at the beach, then make sure you use an ice box with plenty of ice packs and make sure everything is kept really cold.
And unfortunately, sometimes the worst does happen, Linda, and people do develop a foodborne disease. Do you have any advice on how they should deal with that if they suspect that may be the case?
Yeah, I mean, if you have eaten contaminated food, then there really isn't anything you can do at that point. So that's why we kind of have all the steps to try and prevent you from becoming ill in the first place. Obviously, if you do get food poisoning, you may lose a lot of fluids, then vomiting and diarrhea and things like that. So make sure to drink plenty of liquids. So things like water, juices, or these isotonic energy drinks that have electrolytes or things like that, to make sure that you don't become dehydrated. If it goes on, for most food poisoning cases will last for a few days and they'll be self-limiting and you won't need any medical attention. But if it is going on for a long time or you think you're getting dehydrated, then you should contact your doctor. And also, I suppose the people we really need to look out for are the people, who may be more vulnerable. So those would be pregnant women, very young children, as we mentioned, older people, and somebody with a medical condition that means their immune system is compromised in some way. So those people we need to look out for and make sure that they're not becoming too ill, or contact the doctor at an early opportunity.
Great practical advice so far, Linda. I'll just remind anybody who's joining us live here on the live stream this morning, we're streaming live on Safe Food's YouTube and Facebook channels. If you do want to drop us a comment or indeed ask a question that you'd like me to put to Dr. Linda Gordon here this morning, do please drop a comment. And if you're watching back on the live stream afterwards, do leave your comment and we will respond to you. Another really important theme under the EU Choose Safe Food campaign that Safe Food Ireland will be rolling out, Linda, is how to reduce food waste. Now, obviously, with the cost of living, the cost of groceries, everything we see has gone up, up and up. I know for me, certainly with a young family, how to reduce food waste is key in terms of budgeting and what you're doing with your money every week. Where do we start? I mean, there's so many things that you need to look at, really, isn't there?
Absolutely, Sally Ann. As you say, it's really important, particularly at the moment with the rising cost of food and everything else. And also, food waste is bad for the environment, and I think there's been increasing awareness of that in recent years. So it kind of benefits everybody to reduce the amount of food that we're wasting. So the first thing I would advise is to plan ahead. Try and make a meal plan for the week. Sit down, go through see what ingredients you already have at home, and try and come up with a plan for recipes that don't need, that you can, where they're using similar ingredients. Make a shopping list then based on your meal plan and based around what that you need to get. And try and stick to your list when you get to the supermarket. Only buy what you need, and check the date markings, particularly the use by date on perishable food, to avoid buying any food that's going to, be out of date in the next day or two. So, if you can find something that has a longer shelf life on it, that will definitely help to avoid waste. If you are buying something and you're buying something, maybe it's reduced because it's going to go off in the next day or two. If you're not going to use it straight away, freeze it. So I think the freezer is a really good way of kind of getting the most out of our food. And obviously how you store your food then once you bring it home, make sure that you check the labels for any instructions on the best way to store it. And then with any perishable food, make sure that you are checking the dates, and check the dates of anything that's in your fridge, throw out anything that's gone past the use by date. So I suppose with date markings, just to remember as well that the best before date is a guideline. So that's about the quality of the food, not about the safety. So it's really about telling you, we can guarantee that it will look and taste and smell as you would expect it to, up to this point if you store it correctly. But food that's past its best before date may still be perfectly fine to eat. So, don't throw away something just because the best before date, has passed. The use by date is different, and that's a deadline, and that is about the safety of the food. So we would never recommend eating any food past the use by date.
So that's a really important distinction, that best before, may still be usable, but use by, that's it. That's the cutoff point, and it needs to be done and dusted by then. That's really good advice, Linda. In terms of, I suppose, the reducing your food waste, I don't know if this is one of the tips, but I always find sometimes you think maybe the fridge looks very empty, but if you look at your cupboard, you still actually have a lot in there. And it's good to do a quick recce of what you actually have on hand before you make the list and go to do the food shop, so that you're not buying stuff that's already sitting there and maybe, the date is passing on, and you can try and use that up without replicating it and filling the cupboard all over again.
Absolutely, yeah. Check what you have in your cupboards. And I know, tinned foods and things like that can last for a long time. And, there's nothing wrong with things like tinned vegetables and things like that, and frozen vegetables and things too. I think we find sometimes the fruit and veg, or the things that kind of end up going off a bit too quickly, or we don't use them up fast enough. So I would, using tinned vegetables or frozen vegetables, vegetables are usually frozen at the point where they're kind of the freshest. So they can be, nutritionally, they're very healthy. So that can be a good way of making sure that you have vegetables available, but, that they're not going off in the fridge. And as you say, see what you have already before and what meals you can make out of that by maybe just adding a few ingredients.
And of course, then with the meals that you have already made, a good tip as well is to love your leftovers.
Absolutely, yeah. That is so true. If you store your leftovers correctly, you can bring them for lunch the next day into work. Is something I often do. It's very handy. You don't have, when you're rushing in the morning, you can have another dinner, or you can freeze them to use at a later date. Now, the thing with leftovers is that, when it's cooked food, you need to get it into the fridge within 2 hours of cooking. So you want it to cool down quickly and get it into the fridge within 2 hours, and then use it up for within 3 days. So you do have time, and if you don't think you're going to use it up and it's something that's suitable for freezing, absolutely put it in the freezer, and then you can use it. Just remember to maybe label it with a marker or something, so you know what it is and when you froze it. But absolutely, using your leftovers is a great way of avoiding food waste.
Now, another one of the key themes under the EU Choose Safe Food campaign that Safe Food will be taking part in is food hygiene. So what we do when we're actually at home in our kitchens, when we're preparing our food, cooking our food, and afterwards. There's some important points of information that you'd like to get across on that, Linda, this morning.
Well, good food hygiene is really important. It's about not allowing bacteria a chance to get comfortable in your kitchen at home. So it's really about, I suppose, the basics of good hygiene and cleaning. And it's not about, spraying bleach everywhere or trying to sterilizing every surface. It really is about good hygiene and targeted hygiene, I suppose, knowing where you need to take a bit of extra care. So It's things like cleaning your utensils, chopping boards, things like that. Give them a good scrub with hot soapy water, or you can, if you have a dishwasher, put them in the dishwasher. But if not, a good scrub with hot soapy water, particularly if they have been used with raw meat, raw fish, raw vegetables, things like that, that might harbor harmful bacteria. It's also about drying things off properly, making sure your surfaces are clean and dry before you start. So, with your worktops, give them clean them down before you start preparing food. And then if you're preparing or handling raw meat, raw eggs, or root vegetables that might have soil on them, you need to clean that straight away. And the thing to remember is that it can be a good idea when you're cleaning up after handling raw meat or something like that, is with your worktop to maybe use a disinfectant. So clean any of the visible dirt off first, and then maybe spray a disinfectant spray that will kill any bacteria that might still be present. And just check with your disinfectant whether it needs to be left in contact with the surface for a minute or two before wiping off. And also remembering things that you might have touched, so handles on your fridge or your cooker, your tap or your sink, anything like that you might have touched with hands that you were also handling raw meat.
Now, there are a couple of areas within the kitchen that can be a real breeding ground for bacteria if they're not looked after properly. I suppose I'm thinking of chopping boards, dishcloths, even tea towels. Like, they need to be looked after regularly too.
They do, yes, they do. Things like dishcloths especially, they are great because if it's a damp environment, they might still have food debris on them if you don't clean them properly, and you could be just spreading bacteria around your kitchen. So we recommend that you change your dishcloth every 2 days. So you can wash them in the washing machine, on a hot wash, or you can boil them in water for 15 minutes. If you've used it to wipe up, if you've spilled raw meat juice or something like that on the surface and you've used a dishcloth to wipe that off, then I would change that straight away for a fresh one. And then if your dishcloth smells, it's definitely time to change it.
Yeah, that's a definite indicator for sure.
Yeah.
Guidance on food allergens and food intolerances. That's another one of the 4 key themes that is going to be looked at as part of the EU Choose Safe Food campaign that Safe Food Ireland will be rolling out. So, I mean, this has been a big issue. I suppose in the last 10 years, we've all had a lot more, awareness of intolerances. But what will you be targeting as part of the campaign when it comes to this?
Well, really, it's around the whole area, as you say, of food hypersensitivity is what we call collectively food allergy, a food intolerance, and celiac disease. So this is where somebody has a bad reaction to a food that is otherwise safe for everyone else to eat. So it's different to food poisoning. For example, if you have, salmonella in an undercooked chicken, that can make anybody that eats it ill. But this is where something like peanut, which is a perfectly nutritious source of protein for lots of people, but it could be very dangerous for somebody with an allergy to that. So it's where people have an allergy to a particular food or to a protein within a food generally.
And in terms of an allergen, you can hear me there, Linda. Sorry, it's just the technology. In terms of allergens. Yeah, absolutely. Just in terms of allergens, that's something that a person is allergic or intolerant to. So how do you know if you have a food allergy or an intolerance?
Well, if you have the difference between food allergy and food intolerance, really, food allergy is where the immune system is reacting, and that's a very fast reaction where people might come out of hives or they get swelling, or in severe cases they can have breathing difficulties, and it will happen really quickly after the food, and it is the immune system that is reacting to the food. For example, somebody might be allergic to crustaceans, so they would be allergic to anything like crab meat or prawns, shrimp, lobster, and it will be to a particular protein or group of proteins in there. An intolerance is where you have difficulty in digesting a food, and so those will be mostly gastrointestinal type symptoms you will see, and it will be not as acute. It's not something that will necessarily happen immediately afterwards. Somebody might have an intolerance to lactose, for example, which is a sugar found in milk and milk proteins. Celiac disease then is an immune system reaction to gluten, which is a protein naturally found in a lot of grains, in wheat, barley, and rye, and it's different again to an allergy and an intolerance. So the allergen then is the food or the protein within the food that the person is actually allergic or intolerant to. But if you suspect you are reacting to a food, either an allergy or an intolerance or celiac disease, then you should definitely go to your doctor or a registered dietitian. We would advise people against diagnosing themselves or, starting to eliminate different food groups from their diet without medical support, because that can be quite harmful, and you may be eliminating something that you need in your diet. You can misdiagnose it, and you may not be able to figure out what the problem is. So you're risking then cutting out food groups that are perfectly safe or nutritious for you. So we would always advise going to the doctor or dietitian, getting that medical support.
So if somebody does have a diagnosis of one of those that you mentioned there, Linda, I suppose self-management is key on this in the treatment going forward. And things like labeling are so important to people who are trying to manage something like that.
Yes, absolutely. They are very, very important. And that's why, unfortunately, we see, sometimes when we're looking at products being recalled from supermarket shelves and things, and sometimes quite often, in fact, it is around labeling for allergens. So there isn't something wrong with the food, but the label is not highlighting that a particular allergen is present. And, the consequences for somebody who has an allergy and eating something that they shouldn't be eating can be very, very serious indeed. So it is really important, and it's important for people who have an allergy or an intolerance to kind of, I suppose, take ownership and inform themselves, and also inform any businesses. So, if you are eating out, you need to communicate. Or if you're buying something, you're going into a bakery or something and you're buying loose food, it's really important to communicate that you have an allergy, or that you are buying this for somebody who has an allergy or an intolerance, and to be really explicit about it. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Absolutely. Food businesses have a responsibility to give people the information that they need. And then the consumer has a responsibility to kind of inform the food business that they are buying this or ordering this either for themselves or somebody else that has a food allergy.
Yeah, and I think we'll all be aware that a lot of businesses do, I suppose, advertise on their menus exactly what is in each of the dishes, and that's a good point of reference for people. But it's no harm, again, to back that up with the in-person reminder, well, I'm gluten intolerant or whatever it may be, to
Yes.
inform them and give that in-person reminder.
Absolutely, that's a good point, Sally-Ann. It's really important to inform people. So even if you're reading the allergen advice, and in Ireland they are obliged to give the allergen advice in writing, they're giving the information on it. But sometimes in a kitchen they run out of some ingredient and they substitute something else, or and they may not, in a busy kitchen, they may not realize it, or sometimes cross-contamination can happen. But if they know that you have an allergy or an intolerance or celiac disease, then they can take extra precautions to make sure that there's no contamination of your meal. So it really is important to have that two-way communication, that the business is providing the information and that the consumer is telling them, that it is for somebody with an allergy.
Linda, can I ask you about those terms that we see, the labels free from and may contain? What's the difference and the implications for people of both of those?
Yeah, well, we see those kind of things a lot. Free from is something that is telling you that it's not something that people have to put on. They have to list, if it's a packaged food, they have to list the allergy. They have to highlight any allergens in their ingredient list. If it's in a restaurant or something, they have to give any of the allergens that are present in the food. But the free from is an optional thing that businesses may want to add. Free from is something that has to be backed up by, and again, this is where the science comes into it. It has to be backed up by testing. That you can't just slap it on there. You have to be able to demonstrate that it is free from if you're going to tell people that this is absolutely safe for them. So sometimes businesses might buy it in from somewhere else to allow, to give their customers or their a bit more choice. But can be difficult to guarantee that any food is free from a particular allergen. The may contain labels, so that's called precautionary labeling. That should really only be used where there's a risk, that a risk assessment has been done. It's where the allergen is not an ingredient in the food, but maybe the food is produced in a facility where they are also producing something. Say if it's in the case of peanuts, that they're producing something that contains peanuts, and they can't guarantee that that cross-contamination hasn't happened. So, it's very difficult for people with food allergies when they see this, because they don't know, can I eat this or not? So I think it's really important that for businesses not to use it too much, unless they've actually done the risk assessment and they feel that the risk is there. So again, as a customer, you don't really know whether it may contain the allergen at a very low level as a sort of as a result of cross-contamination.
Yeah, so it seems to be always the case of err on the side of caution, Linda, by the sound of it. Just finally, before we finish our live stream this morning, I'll remind you again, we are streaming live here on Facebook and YouTube on the Safe Food channels, talking about the EU Choose Safe Food campaign, which is going to be rolling out in the coming weeks and months. Linda, you'll be playing a big part in this campaign, which Ireland is delighted to be a part of for the first time with European partners. I suppose there'll be a number of campaigns and activities happening over the coming months. It's an exciting time for Safe Food to be involved in this.
It is, absolutely, and people should look out for our social media channels and see, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and then they will keep up to date with the campaign and what's happening and any food safety messages that we're putting out there.
Well, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you this morning, Dr. Linda Gordon, Chief Food Specialist with Safe Food, bringing us all the information about what's going to be coming up in the EU Choose Safe Food campaign over the coming weeks and months. First time Ireland has been involved in this campaign, so a little bit of a coup for us to be involved in this, and we're looking forward to be working with our European partners and finding out lots of information over the coming months. Again, if you have any questions or comments, do please drop them under our live stream, which is about to come to an end. If you're watching the replay and you have a question, do leave your question and we will respond to you. My thanks again to Dr. Linda Gordon for taking part in this morning's live stream, thanks to Safe Food and the EU Choose Safe Food launch. If you would like to find out any more information, you can very quickly Google EU Choose Safe Food and all of the information will come up. If you go to the website, there's information in a number of languages and for each of the 16 countries that's taking part in the campaign. And as Linda mentioned, do please stay in touch with us on all of our social media channels. But for myself, Sally-Ann Barrett, and Dr. Linda Gordon of Safe Food, thanks for joining us on the live stream this morning, and we hope you enjoyed all the information.